There is just not too much one can say about Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, because what he's done will leave you speechless, folks, and he's going to tell you more about it in just a minute. Okay, he's been a guest on our show, Cowboy Logic Radio, member of our Talk America Radio kitchen cabinet, and he just happened to carry the nuclear football for Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Buzz Patterson, United States Air Force retired, is the author of a New York Times bestsellers, a bunch of them, Dereliction of Duty, the eyewitness account of how Bill Clinton compromised America's national security, Reckless Disregard, how liberal Democrats undercut our military, endanger our soldiers, and jeopardize our security, something they're doing right now, and War Crimes, the left's campaign to destroy the military and lose the war on terror, Conduct Unbecoming, how Barack Obama is endangering our national security, just to name a few. Colonel Patterson served 20 years as a pilot on active duty in the U.S. Air Force, saw tours of duty worldwide, including combat ops in Grenada, Somalia, Rwanda, Haiti, and Bosnia. What kind of countries are they? No, don't say it. Don't say it. This is not CNN. Third world countries, there you go. From 96 to 98, Colonel Patterson was the senior military aide to President Bill Clinton. And during that time, he was responsible for the president's emergency satchel, otherwise known as the nuclear football, the black bag that the nation's nuclear capability that accompanies the president of all times. And again, boy, does he have stories to tell. In addition, Colonel Patterson was operational commander for all military units assigned to the White House that included Air Force One, Marine One, Camp David, White House Transportation Agency, and White House Mess. Among his many military commendations, he received the Defense Superior Service Medal for accomplishments while at the White House, and was awarded the Air Force Air Medal for flying 15 combat support missions and then besieged Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, back in '94. He retired in 2001 to pursue a career as a commercial airline pilot, a writer, and conservative speaker. His experiences and writings have been featured in such films as Hillary the Movie and Blocking the Path to 9/11. He's a frequent guest on talk shows across the country, including television appearances at ABC News, Diane Sawyer, Hannity, O'Reilly Factor, CBS Morning Show, Fox and Friends, Hardball with Chris Matthews, The Dennis Miller Show, C-SPAN's Book Notes, Joe Scarborough, Heartland with John Kasich, MSNBC, and you've heard his radio shows everywhere from Rush Limbaugh to Cowboy Logic Radio, and everyone in between. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome yet another American hero and patriot, Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Donna and Don through Joe Dugan invited me out here. I live in Los Angeles. I used to live in just down the road in Charleston, South Carolina, which was God's place on earth, and my first assignment in the Air Force, and still have very fond memories of that being my first time flying airplanes for the Air Force. And I'm a North Carolina boy. I was born in Chapel Hill, so coming across the border was a little bit difficult, but I certainly found a way to love Charleston and a way to love Myrtle Beach. As Donna said, before we get into where we're going right now with making America great again and my involvement with the Trump campaign, I would like to talk about some of my background so you can understand how just a small town southern boy who came in the Air Force to be a pilot can now be talking to you and having some influence and writing books and participating in campaigns. My father was an Air Force pilot. He was in the Air Force for 33 years. He's a Vietnam veteran. He flew AC-130 gunships up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail back in the day and shot up a lot of bad guys in their trucks. And he ended up retiring as a two-star after 33 years and being the Air Force's Special Operation Command Commander. I came in the Air Force in 1981 initially. If you recall, that was a transition between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, and I initially had put in my application under Carter to be an attorney for the Air Force, and then when Ronald Reagan was elected, I thought, you know what, I want to be a war fighter. I want to be in the front lines of battle. I don't want to do this backdoor stuff, and so I became a pilot in the Air Force. I'd never flown before, but the Air Force taught me well, and I went right to work flying out of Charleston, South Carolina Air Force Base after my wings in 1983, which taught me a lot about, in fact, I don't talk about this a lot, but my very first military combat experience was in October of 1983, when Reagan decided to go into Grenada and to prevent the Soviet Union from expanding their operations and building fighter bases in the Caribbean. And my very first operation in combat was the second airplane on the ground in Point Salinas in Grenada, and we were dropping Delta Force and SEALs, and we made sure that airfield was going to fall very quickly to the United States of America and not become a Russian and Soviet Union fighter base for the Soviets and for Cuba. So that was my first taste into combat. I flew throughout the 80s and early 90s as an as an Air Force pilot, and got involved with a lot of special operations. Where my change in attitude and change in, I think, political frame of reference and conservative ideology became when, in the summer of 1995, I was a squadron commander in the northern part of Northern California. I was a C-141 squadron commander, for those of you who remember that beautiful airplane that used to fly around the world and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I was a squadron commander in Northern California, and as such, for those of you who've been in the military, you know that a flying squadron is much like a fraternity in college. So I was the head guy. I was a squadron commander. The phone rang in my office in 1995, and I answered the phone, and the voice on the phone said, well, this is the White House wanting you to come interview to be the president's military aide. Now, I immediately assumed it was the yahoos down the hall trying to play games with me, so I hung up on the phone call from the White House, thinking that those guys will never get me again. And the phone rang again, and it was, in fact, the White House Chief of Staff's office, Leon Panetta's office, to be precise. And Leon Panetta said, he'd been one of 6 picked out to be interviewed by the White House staff to come out and be President Bill Clinton's senior military aide and carry the nuclear football. Quite frankly, I had no idea what that job entailed. I heard about the nuclear football. I knew there was something that was pretty important that followed the president, but I had no idea about the job, and it's a job they don't let you apply for. So after taking the second phone call and realizing that discretion's the better part of valor, I flew out to Washington, D.C. and interviewed to be through the White House process to potentially become President Bill Clinton's military aide. Now, the process is a very intensive 3-day process. By the time I got there, they had talked to my family members, my best friends in high school, my college roommates. They had all my tax returns. They had my credit card receipts. So they knew more about me than I knew about myself, and they were just looking for me to step on it somehow and embarrass myself, but I didn't do that, fortunately. And so I got to the 3-day process, and ultimately, Leon Panetta was the man I ended up meeting, and he said, this is a very important job, and we don't really care about your politics. We just want to know if you can loyally and honorably do your job. And I said, yeah, I've been flying airplanes and saving people and dropping bombs. I can certainly do this for a living. And they said, well, sure. Well, we'd like to ask you to come out and be President Bill Clinton's military aid. So I accepted on that night, and about 2 weeks later, I was actually in the White House. I had to sell my house in Northern California very, very abruptly, and being single wasn't that hard, and get beat feet out to Northern Virginia. I had a place, a bedroom in the White House, and an office in the White House, if you can imagine, as a young major. How overwhelming that must be. But I remember walking into the White House my first day. It was a very crisp spring day, and just thinking, you know, I have reached the pinnacle of what I could possibly have done. I've flown airplanes in combat. I've been very happy. I've done my job diligently, and I've done without, with complete loyalty and credibility. And now my very first day in the White House, I'm walking into my office, into my bedroom, and I'm serving the commander-in-chief, the president, who is just now beginning to start the re-election campaign of 1996, if you guys recall those days. So I got there right at the very beginning of the re-election campaign, and we hit the road running like nobody's business. We were flying across the country. We were hitting 4 and 5, 6 cities a day, and I had the football. And to go back a little bit, so that you understand the historical basis for the military aid. Ever since President George Washington, there's been a military aid. There's been a military guy, as kind of a senior ranking person that that would be at the president's side, that could answer questions or give him advice, or just be a confidant there if he needed some help in terms of the military. Under John F. Kennedy, when the advent of nuclear weapons happened, and during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they realized that the president had to have a no kidding, hands-on military aid with the nuclear football capability and the military codes, the nuclear codes, to be able to respond. Now, the way the process works, and there's been a lot of stuff talking in the press recently. It's been kind of fun to watch President Trump go back and forth with Little Kim in North Korea, and also back and forth with, thank God, not the future president, Hillary Clinton. So the way the process works is that there's a large black satchel, which is called the football. And the military aide possesses that football. He's the only guy that actually can get into the football. There's a bunch of codes and algorithms and things that have to happen. But the way the process is supposed to work is the president has the nuclear codes, and he needs the military aide to be there to help him transmit those codes or communicate those codes with the Pentagon. He gets down to the Pentagon senior authorities, and that's when people get the signal out in submarines to start turning keys, or in missile silos to start turning keys, or in bombers, B-52s or B-1s or B-2s to start turning keys. So the whole thing kind of flows downhill, but it does take two human beings. The human being, number one, being the president, the most important person. Human being number two, being the military aide that's there to facilitate that. And I was the number two guy, and I'm in the military guy that gets facilitate that. So that's how I got there. And it does require that you have an office and a bedroom in the White House. So for the years 1996 to 1998, I actually lived with the Clintons. So you can imagine the things that I saw on a daily basis, and no 2 days were ever the same. Time for a drink. So my bedroom was in the East Wing, lower part of the East Wing, and of course the Clintons lived up in the middle part of the residence. But I was supposed to be within 2 minutes response time from them, no matter where they were. So we would go on trips. We would go on Air Force One, I was with them, Marine One, I was with them. We would go overseas, vacations, whatever. I was always in the hotel room or the castle room or whatever complex we were staying in. I had the room right next door to them. So it was 2 years of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed exposure to what these two people were all about. Now, I actually, I've written several books, but my first book, Dereliction of Duty, which was a bestseller for about a year on New York Times and still doing pretty well, talks about my day-to-day existence because I walked in like I think most American service people or civil service workers would walk in. I walked in with grand expectations. I walked in with just enthusiasm. Again, I wasn't neither right or left at the time. I was a military guy, so I was taught to just salute smartly and respond to whoever was my boss, and I did that. So I walked into this office and this experience thinking, okay, I'm walking into the most important building in the world with the most important person in the world, where the real policy goes down and where action takes place, and someplace that place I can be really, really proud of. Well, it didn't take me long, literally a matter of a couple of weeks, till I realized that I had walked into a hornet's nest, and they weren't all that great, and they weren't all that up to speed in terms of organizations that I had worked for privately, or personally, previously. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I don't want to make this all about the Clintons because I want to move on, but I will be certainly willing to talk to you about the Clintons, Hillary, and Chelsea later on in the evening as we disperse from here. So my first experience with the Clintons after getting hired was we went to a professional golf tournament. I used to jog in the morning with the president when he still jogged, and he used to like to go to a lot of golf tournaments. So we were at a golf tournament, professional golf tournament in Lake Manassas, Virginia, and in 1996. And if you recall, during this time, ironically, Saddam Hussein was in charge of Iraq, and he was trying to extinguish the Kurds in the northern part of Iraq. He was trying to ethnically cleanse with chemical weapons and biological weapons the northern part of Iraq. He wanted to just decimate and remove the hundreds of thousands of Kurdish people who lived in the northern part of Iraq. I say all this because it's my job as the military aide. I was also the person who took call screens. So if the phone call came in for President Clinton and we were away from the White House, it could be Hillary or Jesse Jackson or just about anybody. I would receive the phone call, and they would go through me to approach the president and say, "Sir, I have so-and-so on the line. Would you like to take the phone call?" So on this day, we have the Republican Guard in Iraq that are storming north and attempting to essentially kill hundreds of thousands of Kurdish people in the northern part of Iraq. His citizens, by the way. Not ours, but his citizens. So we, the American people, had said, okay, as a response, we'll launch our fighters and bombers, and we'll go up there, and we will repel the Republican Guard and push back this attack and save these people. So at this golf tournament, my job was to receive phone calls. I received 3 phone calls from Sandy Berger, who was a National Security Council advisor. Some of you may know him now as Sandy Burglar, because he stole a whole lot of important crap and pushed it down his pants and destroyed it. But at the time, he was a National Security Council advisor. So Sandy's calling me saying, "Buzz, we've got fighters and bombers in cockpits. We are prepared to go. We're prepared to fly under the cover of darkness. We're prepared to repel the Republican Guard and save the Kurdish people." So I was on board. These guys and girls in cockpits were my peers. I understood fully what was going on. So 3 times I approached President Bill Clinton, who wanted to watch the golf tournament, and 3 times I was rebuffed by Clinton saying, "I don't have time to take the phone call. Tell Berger I'll get back to him later." And I did on all 3 occasions. Now, the moral of this story is not so much that President Bill Clinton likes to watch golf. The moral of the story was that when his senior national security policy advisor and his senior military aide walks up to him and says, "Sir, we've got to act now. We've got the cover of darkness. We've got fighters and bombers in position to launch," and the president did not take a single phone call. So he chose to watch golf tournaments over having the lives of 300,000 Kurdish members assassinated in the northern part of Iraq. That is my how do you do welcome to being President Bill Clinton's military aide. On the second occasion, now I am sworn to secrecy as a military guy. I'm not at this point in time writing a book. I'm not even keeping a journal. I'm just trying to do the best I possibly can for this man. My second occasion, and I knew all about Monica Lewinsky. I knew about Paula Jones. They were in and out of the Oval Office. And the way the Oval Office access works is you have lapel pins, and the Secret Service can tell what your access is to the president by the color of your lapel pin. And I remember saying many times to the Secret Service, why is the young intern who's 20 getting the same access to the Oval Office as everybody else is getting? And that was Monica Lewinsky. So I was told just to leave it alone, presidential best friend kind of thing. And I came to know Monica, not as well as Bill came to know her. Which probably saved my career and my life. But I did come to know Monica. I knew what was going on. But I wouldn't even have written about this in my book, but this is another telling thing. My books are written from a standpoint of a senior military officer who is involved in seeing a political situation go down and coming back to the point, okay, what is best for us? What is best for the common taxpayer? What is best for our military men and women who go to war around the globe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, don't get any kind of recognition, and what should we expect from our commander-in-chief? So this book was written from that perspective. So I don't talk about Monica Lewinsky. I do talk about the fact, though, that correspondingly, when the Monica Lewinsky situation hit the mass news, I mean, I knew about it. I'd seen him around. I knew what was going on. I even walked on him on one occasion, and I kept my mouth shut. But when the Drudge Report released the Monica Lewinsky situation, the story, the Drudge Report broke it back in January of 1998, and then the Washington Post picked up on it, and then everybody else had to pick up on it. I was the first guy, and they say timing is everything. I was the first guy that walked in and had to be on President Bill Clinton's schedule that morning at 7 a.m. And now I write about this in Dereliction, and I also write about it in a blog I did recently. But my duties with the president was to make sure that he was way up to speed on military issues. He was way up to speed on how nuclear processes would fall out. He was way up to speed on if we ever needed to do the codes, how it worked, how the exercises worked, how the process flowed down from there, and how it had to go out. So one of my jobs was to every 3 or 4 months go in there and say, okay, sir, this is how this needs to happen, and do you have any questions? I would be there just to be I was his senior guy. I had to make sure he was cool with how it all went down. So that morning that the Drudge Report broke it, I was the first guy on Clinton's schedule. So I'm walking into the outer Oval Office, which was where Betty Curry sat and her secretary, social secretary sat. And the way the Oval Office is constructed, there's an outer office, and then there's the actual Oval Office that you guys see that's on TV a lot, which is the actual office space. And then there's a room, a hallway that comes back off, which is kind of an informal Oval Office, which is where Clinton would go watch college football or do his thing with Monica, apparently. But anyway, so I'm walking into the Oval Office that morning at about 6:50. I'm the first guy on the schedule. Betty Curry, his secretary, is not there. I know I'm the first person, and I walk by all these newspapers that are lined up on the front, on the top of Betty's desk. And that's what he always wanted. Clinton always wanted the headlines of the day to be out there so he could figure out how to respond to the latest crisis. So the LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post, they were all there, and I remember walking by and knowing about the whole Monica thing having hit the press, and I looked down at the the Washington Post title, and it says, "Sex Scandal Rocks White House." Now, I knew it wasn't going to be a really happy time to be working there that day with President Bill Clinton. I used to pick and choose my fights and my battles with that guy, but I knew I had to walk in at this point in time and say, "Okay, sir, what do you want to do?" So I walk in, and typically the protocol was that I would say, "Okay, sir, you got any questions about the military? You got any questions about how the nuclear codes work? And can I just in passing, can I see that you in fact have the nuclear codes?" Because the nuclear codes are a credit card sized document, which Don alluded to, credit card sized document that actually Bill Clinton kept rubber banded to his other credit cards in his pants pocket. He didn't wear a wallet. He had to have a rubber band, the nuclear codes, and his credit cards. So as I'm walking into his office, I see that he's behind his desk. He's just bloodshot as hell. His white, his skin is white as a ghost. He's been up all night. He's not in any kind of mood to talk. I can see that. So I said, "Sir, I'll just come back later, if you don't mind. I can see you're not in a good place, but I'll just come back later. We can talk about everything else. But if you can just do me a favor and show me the nuclear codes, you've got the nuclear codes in your person." Now, he didn't, which became a huge deal. So I said, he said, "I don't have them with me. I don't know. They might be upstairs in the residence." And I said, "Well, when's the last time you saw him?" So we ended up doing a big search of the residence, and I had to come back down and say, "We can't find him, sir. When's the last time you saw him?" "I don't know." And I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't know? Has it been days?" He goes, "Possibly." I said, "Has it been weeks?" He said, "Possibly." And I said, "Has it been months?" He said, "Possibly." So here we are. This is a young major in the Air Force, and I'm thinking, this guy has not only been having an affair with this young intern, but now he has lost the frickin' nuclear codes. So I've got to call the Pentagon back, and it has never happened before. So I'm the bearer of great tidings again. "Okay, guys, we've got no nuclear codes. So what are we going to do now?" So the military just really jumped to their butts and got some recreated, got them over the next day. But there was a period of time, which is the moral of the story is that there was a period of time, and I write about this in Dereliction, that we as a country, we as a commander-in-chief and President Bill Clinton, did not have the ability to either launch or retaliate with nuclear weapons for what may have been several months. And to me, that is dereliction of duty, to say the least, but it's also what was speaking to me, really telling to me, was the fact that his only thing to me after that was, please make sure this does not get to the press. He did not want that rolled in on top of the Monica Lewinsky thing, and so I told him, I said, "Sir, I will make sure that as long as I'm here, the rest will not get this." But then I was able to retire in 2001 and write about it in Dereliction of Duty, so now you all know just how derelict that guy was as our commander-in-chief and the purveyor of our military, and it could not have been a worst-case scenario having that guy running our troops. Could not have been. So I'm going to move on to one more, if I have time, one more Clinton story, then I'll talk about what I'm doing here for you guys today. As the military aid guy, as the Air Force guy also especially, I was not just in charge of the nuclear football and keeping Bill Clinton out of trouble. I was also responsible for Air Force One, Marine One, all those crews. All the drivers were Army guys. All the cooks and chefs were Navy guys. All the communications people, White House communications people, are a huge organization across the river over in Fort Belvoir that do all of the communications and intel and computer stuff for the White House. So that was my real job, was being the daddy rabbit to all those people for 2 years as we traveled around the world. Now, the final straw in my time with the Clintons, and I've got Hillary Clinton question. I've got Hillary stuff too, which I don't have time for tonight. But I'll be happy to share. Trust me. What a bitch! What an evil bitch! What a vindictive, evil bitch! But but let me get. I'll come back to. If we got time, I'll come back to that later. So my last straw with Bill Clinton was that because I was in charge of all the Air Force One people and the crews and in Marine One, you know, back in this was like 1998, so there was a lot of things going on in the military in terms of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, and so we're flying back from a long trip in Europe. I think most trips were like 10 or 12 days, and then we would land on Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base, and then we'd helicopter over from Andrews One to the south lawn of the White House on Marine One. So this is a typical trip. So I've got Bill and Hillary on the airplane. I get them on Marine One. We transfer back over to the White House. It's about midnight. So we would land on the south lawn, and I would put the football away, and I would try to get Mr. Clinton, President Clinton, upstairs into his bedroom and put him to bed, and then I could start doing my thing, because my job wasn't complete until he was down, and then I had to be awake again in the morning before he got up. So he didn't sleep. So literally for me, it's like a 4 or 5 hour a night for 2-year kind of deal. So it was stressful. Anyway, so I get the president in his bedroom after this European trip, and I get to my room, and I'm starting to wind down and watch some TV, and the phone rings in my office, and it's the president's pilot, Colonel Mark Donnelly, good friend of mine, Air Force Colonel Mark Donnelly, good friend of mine, who was the president's Air Force One pilot. So whenever we went overseas, Mark Donnelly was the guy flying the airplane, and he and I, being pilots and Air Force guys, got along great. So we came back from this trip. I'm putting myself to bed, and the phone in my bedroom rings in the south, and downstairs in the East Wing, and it's Colonel Mark Donnelly. And I say, "Sir, okay, Mark, what's up?" He goes, "Hey, Buzz, we got a problem." I said, "Okay, what's up, Mark?" You know, now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. He goes, "Well, I have a young staff sergeant, female, flight attendant. All the Air Force One back-in people were Air Force enlisted. So all the flight attendants were Air Force staff sergeants, female staff sergeants, and all the security people were Air Force enlisted people doing all the security. All the communications people were Air Force. So the front end of the airplane was officers and pilots, and then the back of the airplane was all communications people and flight attendants and security." So he's calling me and says he has this young female staff sergeant in front of her, and I know her name, and I will not release it tonight. First name is Leah. That's all I'll give you. But that Leah was in his office in tears because President Bill Clinton has sexually attacked her on board Air Force One in one of the galleys and sexually molested her. So I said, my first response, and I know this is on TV, so I can't give you my first response. My second response was, okay, what does she want? Now, you know, what does she want? So he said, she's married, she has young children, she's a staff sergeant, she wants to remain promotable in the Air Force. All she wants to do is have the commander-in-chief apologize to her at some future point on Air Force One. Now, that next morning as a young major, I've been shot at with bullets from enemies, ranging from the Russians to the Cubans to the Bosnians, and I have never, ever in my life felt as insecure and unprepared as I felt the next morning walking down from my office to the Oval Office as a young Air Force major and confronting the commander-in-chief and telling him that he had to apologize to a young female staff sergeant for sexual molestation aboard Air Force One, America's airplane, the one we're all paying for. Now, that was the toughest thing in my career I've ever had to do. And I did it, and his reaction to me was much less honest than I would have thought it would have been. He was very non-contrite. He said, okay, I'll talk to her next time we're on Air Force One. I'm sorry if it upset her feelings, that kind of thing. But he totally grasped her and fondled her on Air Force One. So after that, we arranged an apology on Air Force One 2 weeks later. Then we were both flying again. We did it in, the president's got a office space, kind of an office, and also a conference room on Air Force One. We did it in the office. We got Mr. Clinton, President Clinton, and this young lady, and she accepted his apology, and that was the end of that. However, from my perspective, having been a commander in the Air Force for years and having prosecuted men and women for many sexual transgressions, to include just poor workplace humor, or the use of an off word in an office environment, and we had Article 15 them or court-martialed them. Here is the commander-in-chief getting off with blatant physical sexual harassment on board Air Force One, which to me was completely unacceptable and was the final straw into me leaving the Air Force and writing this, because this is the story that needs to be told, that still needs to be told, and I couldn't do this in the military till I retired in 2001 and went to fly as a commercial airline pilot for Delta Airlines, and so I wanted to get this off my chest and a lot of other people's chests that I had worked with, and so it became a bestseller, New York Times bestseller for a long time. Rush Limbaugh carried it for a long time. Amazon still carries it, still selling very well. I've written 3 more books since then. I embedded myself as a journalist in Iraq in 2005. As an Air Force guy, I spent all my time at 35,000 feet and didn't get a lot of chance to see what was happening down on the ground. So I went and lived with our Marines and Army troops in Iraq in the summer of 2005, and that will wake you up, and that will get your attention in terms of the enemy that we face going forward in terms of what is radical Islam. And I did that and wrote my 3rd book, and my 4th book is about President Obama and conduct unbecoming. My real talk here tonight is to appeal to you. I got out of the aviation business about 1.5 years ago when I was contacted to join the Trump team and be a Trump surrogate in California and start talking about the importance of character and integrity in our U.S. military. Thank you. I alternatively had a agenda that I saw that Mrs. Clinton was running, and knowing Mrs. Clinton, I could not stand the possibility, not even remotely, of her being our commander-in-chief. So I retired from Delta Airlines and have thrown myself into being a Make America Great Again person. And a funny story, knowing Hillary and having lived with them for 2 years, when I started leaving aviation and getting back into speaking and writing and stuff, this is how Hillary operates. I got a phone call. I mean, I live in Los Angeles now. So I used to live on the East Coast. I used to live in Charleston. I used to live in Atlanta. I used to live a lot of places. But I moved to California back in 2006, 2007. And the phone in my office rang, and it was Hillary's professional secretary, a person that I had known, 20 years in the past, working at the White House. So I knew we had shared some good times, and I knew that she wasn't calling me because she was concerned about my health and welfare. She was consoling to see what I was going to be up to with Hillary Clinton. So this is an honest-to-God story. So my phone rings in my office, and I haven't talked to Chris Insko in literally 20 years. And she calls and says, hey, Buzz, this is Chris. I'm working for Mrs. Clinton. I said, great, congratulations. He goes, can we count on you coming out in support of Mrs. Clinton? I said, no, I don't think that's possibly going to happen. She goes, well, can we call you and count on you not being in opposition? And I said, no, I don't see that happening either. So they said, well, can you just be quiet? And I said, no, that's not going to happen either. So thank God, our guy won. She didn't win. And I'm not taking personal responsibility, but I helped it along. So let's make America great again. I'd love to sell you guys the books. Come see me. Thank you. I do. If I can quick little admin. Oh, can I talk about Hillary too? Oh, good Lord. Let's get this going. Sit down. Good Lord. Hillary Clinton. So if y'all want to leave, you can, but you're going to miss some good stuff. So. So Hillary, when I moved in there, I actually moved in with both of them. So I had like I said, I had a bedroom in the White House and an office in the White House, and no matter where they went, I went. Vacations, Camp David, St. Thomas. I even took Chelsea to her first year in Stanford, first year of school at Stanford. And I will tell you this about the two of them. Bill and I would jog together and have a good time together, and he didn't have a moral fiber in his body, but that was okay with me. We had a good time, but I would tell people, what's he like? I would say, have him over to your house for a barbecue, but keep him away from your wife and your daughter. Just have a demilitarized zone. Just have as much space as you possibly can between that rat and anybody you're close to. Now, Hillary is a whole different figure, a whole different person. She was the person that when in the White House, I had been told by my predecessor, he said, if anybody, you can pretty much get away with anything in this job, but if you piss her off, she will rip your heart out and spit it out. And so I took that seriously, and he was right. So in my 2 years there, I never made her mad. I never crossed her. I saw her routinely just chew people up and eviscerate them. And people that were close to her, too, close aides, close senior aides, close personal aides to her. She would just take them apart. And she would do the same thing to her husband. There was one time when we were, especially after the Monica thing went down, that was not a happy place to be for my last year of service in that building. There was one time when we were on our way to a fundraiser in Washington, D.C., and it was in a hotel. And the way we did these motorcade movements, we had a typical motorcade is you see the limousine with the president and the first lady, and then there would be a black van behind the motorcade, and that's where I sit. I sit, and they call it the control van because it's got all the radios and stuff, and it's where the military aides sat, the doctors sat, the chief of staff of the White House sat, one of the senior agents sat, and it was just all the big hitters other than the first family. So we're coming into this hotel loading dock for this nighttime fundraising thing, top of this hotel. And I can already, I'm right behind the motorcade, so I can already see that their heads they're going at it like nobody's business, So I know this is not going to be one of those events you just kind of roll into. It's going to be kind of a shakedown. And so we get into the way they do these elevator things is that it would be the first lady, the president, myself, a doctor, and one agent. So we get into the elevator, and she is unmittingly just on fire, chewing him out with every four-letter word you've ever heard in your entire life. I mean, it's so unhinged and heated in her rhetoric that I'm trying to lean into the outside of the elevator wall just to avoid the collateral damage, and I'm watching the president just kind of nodding his head like, "Yes, dear, yes, dear." He knows he's lost. This is a done deal. So apparently the deal was that she was holding him responsible for Janet Reno not giving her. Janet Reno was forcing her to testify in the or give her statement in terms of the Whitewater thing, and so Hillary was holding Bill responsible for the Department of Justice lady the Attorney General for not letting her skate on the whole Whitewater thing. So, gotta imagine this. We're going from like floor 1 to like floor 20, and it's a very smooth, very slow operating elevator, and we're all just trying to get out of the way and not hear anything. And I'm looking at the agent, and they're looking at me, and the doctor's going, So it's one of those really uncomfortable things. But as soon as the elevator doors open at the top that walk into the fundraiser, they're all holding hands and shaking, just waving like nothing had happened at all. And that's who the Clintons were. I saw her throw things frequently at people. I never personally was the recipient of one of those, but I saw her throw things at her husband, books, lamps. One time we were coming back from having an event downtown, and she wanted to stop and do a impromptu dinner at some restaurant that the Secret Service guys had not yet swept for security. So the Secret Service guy that was driving was trying to explain to her, "Yes, ma'am, we can go there, but it might be 15, 20-minute wait until we can actually get inside and screen this thing." Well, that was not good for Hillary, and I don't know what book she was reading, but it was a hardcover, and she whipped that thing at the back of the guy who was driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour. He hit him in the back of the head. His head went forward, and I thought, we're going to crash. And his head popped right back up again, and he maintained, but that was a typical Hillary event, Hillary scenario. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. The question is about her visceral hatred to the uniform, and yes, sir, you're 100% correct. There was only a few of us in the White House that were military. There was me, there was the doctor and the nurses. They sometimes wore their uniforms, they sometimes did not. The guys that were the Marine Corps guards outside of the West Wing always wore theirs. When I first arrived there, which is the beginning of the re-election campaign of 1996, I was told by her, "I don't want any military uniforms in the White House." So I said, well, that presents kind of a conundrum because, I, as a military aide, have the nuclear football and all this technology to make this stuff go down. If you're expecting me to look like the Secret Service guys and wear the same dark sunglasses and the same suits with that one satchel, you're not going to be able to find me. So you need to relent on terms of Social Security, national security alone. Your security, if things were to go south and they couldn't find me because I'm part of the protectee package also, they will not find the football and they will not find you, and this will not go well. So that was my very first staff job in the White House, was convincing Hillary to let us wear our uniforms outside of the White House just for protection purposes. And she allowed that, but for the rest of the time that I was there, we had to be wearing whatever the president was wearing, which was typically a business suit or golf attire. But yeah, that's how she felt about the military. Yes, sir. Yes. Every day was a new day with them, and I will tell you that many times, as the senior military aide, I feel like the only adult in the room, including them. Okay, so there are many times their arguments escalated into very verbal, what I would phrase almost domestic violent situations. Yeah, that happened, and I'll be honest with you that there's a very fragile line you have to walk there when you've got people who are Secret Service guys who are there to protect the office of the presidency and the principals, and then you've got the office of the presidency and the principals being the ones that are going at each other. That's a very hard line to enforce with those guys, and like I said, I was there through a couple of those, and I was always able to calm things down. But both, and this should be understood, both Hillary and Bill have very incendiary tempers and language. Now, Bill would be one of those guys that could just blow up, but within 5 minutes you could kind of pull him back down to earth, and he'd have his hand around you apologizing. Hillary, once crossed, is always crossed. So it was very dicey for those of us who were long-term staffers to have to understand that if she went off, the thing was just to placate her best she possibly could. One time we were flying to, and I'll wrap it up for Joe here pretty soon. One time we were flying to a vacation. It was a New Year's Eve vacation. We had flown from Hilton Head, South Carolina, down to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. They were there for a Renaissance weekend. And so I was with them when we had left on like New Year's Eve, and we arrived there on New Year's Day late at night. And we were on Air Force One. We landed at St. Thomas. Now, and when the airplane lands, the Air Force One's, it's a big airplane, but there's only like 68 people on board. So you can just, you have the immediate trust and the pulse of the entire airplane. So I could see that Hillary was already out of her seat, spitting herself into the ceiling about something. So I walked up to approach her, and apparently the deal was that Chelsea had left her school books or textbooks back in the hotel at Hilton Head, and it was everybody's fault but Chelsea's. So Hillary, in no uncertain terms, yelling at me and a whole bunch of other people, said, I want those books flown down here tonight to be in her room by tomorrow morning. So I scrambled an Air Force jet out of Andrews Air Force Base to fly down from Maryland to go to Hilton Head to find those books in the hotel and fly them down to, a great taxpayer expense, by the way, fly them down to Hilton Head so that to St. Thomas, so that they were on the bedside when Chelsea woke up. Now that probably cost us $45,000, but that's how you dealt with Hillary Clinton. And that kind of thing was not the exception, it was the rule. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up now, guys. I would love to have you guys come talk to me and buy my books. I've got a lot more stories, cards, and I'll be joining also a new talk radio site this week as well, so I'll be talking about this stuff online as well. So please check out my cards. I'm on Facebook, all the normal places, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and please sign up and follow me, because I am back doing this now, and I'm going to be kicking ass. So thanks very much.
So if you guys, or y'all, have any more questions, you want to talk to any of our authors, including Buzz, he's going to head next door, so you can go back there and talk to him. And obviously, please patronize all of our great authors and our speakers that are going to be in the next room over. We really do appreciate it. That really is actually going to wrap things up, but I have a bunch of things I do want to say. Number one, if you're a VIP and a speaker, please go up to the Crown Cafe over at the 3rd floor on Building 1. We're going to be there for a little reception afterwards. We want to say, again, thank you to everybody. We must review. A Pelosi is what? A hairy? Hairy? Okay, Pelosi is hairy. And a good-for-nothing vagabond is? Very good. We got. I don't think Schumer's hairy, though. That's the one thing he isn't. Okay, drawings again and book signings in the next room with our wonderful speakers and guests. And if you go to youtube.com/Tea Party Movie, you can tweet, you can flood social media. Please help out in that department. Ruth Cox, our wonderful artist, again, everybody signing these flags. Ray Reynolds, we appreciate your photography, and also your Trump video was awesome. And everybody is invited if you want. We're all going to go out and eat.